From a scared boy trapped in the Upside Down to the ultimate battle against the monster who controls it, here is the complete timeline of every major player in Stranger Things. And to understand how the Upside Down first bled into our world, we have to start with the boy who started it all. He didn't ask for powers, and he didn't ask to be taken, but his disappearance changed everything. This is the entire story of Will Byers. So, Will was born on March 22nd, 1971, to Joyce and Lonnie Byers. Right out of the gate, he was a sweet kid, maybe a little too sweet for the harsh world his dad occupied. He was the younger brother to Jonathan, and those two had a bond that was basically unbreakable from day one. Will was this compassionate, sensitive soul. He's a little kid in a sandbox, right? And there's this crying girl who doesn't have a toy. Will, being the absolute angel he is, gives her his Tonka truck. Now he knows they're broke. He knows Joyce can't just buy him another one. But he does it anyway because he can't stand seeing someone else sad. That is Will Byers in a nutshell. But his dad, Lonnie, total piece of work. He hated that Will was sensitive. He'd make fun of him, calling him queer and using slurs just because Will liked art or was a bit quieter than the other boys. It was awful stuff. Because his dad was such a nightmare, Jonathan basically stepped up to be the role model Will needed. Jonathan introduced him to cool music, making him this legendary mixtape that had Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash on it, which, spoiler alert, becomes super important later. Eventually, Joyce kicks Lonnie to the curb, which was the best move ever. And it's just Joyce, Jonathan, and Will in their house in Hawkins, Indiana, with their dog, Chester. The day Lonnie left, the boys built Castle Byers in the woods. It was pouring rain, and Will was terrible at hammering nails, missing every single time, but they didn't care. They built this sanctuary in the woods, got sick for a week after because of the rain, but it was worth it because it was theirs. Fast forward a bit to 1976. Will starts kindergarten. He's on the swings, totally alone, probably feeling pretty invisible. Then this kid named Mike Wheeler walks up to him. Mike's lonely too, and he just asks, "Do you want to be my friend?" Will says yes, and boom, the party is born. Later they pick up Lucas Sinclair, and then, in 4th grade, Dustin Henderson moves to town and completes the group. They are inseparable. They spend their time playing Dungeons & Dragons in Mike's basement, and Will is the creative heart of the group. He's an artist, constantly drawing. For his 8th birthday, he gets this big box of 120 crayons and draws this rainbow ship, which Joyce loves so much she shows it to everyone at her job, embarrassing Will, but in a loving way. Now we get to November 1983. This is where everything goes sideways. The boys are playing a massive D&D campaign. Mike is the dungeon master, and he summons the Demogorgon. Will decides to cast a fireball, but he rolls the dice and, well, in the game, he loses. It gets late, the game breaks up, and Will has to bike home. He races Dustin for a comic book, gets ahead, and ends up riding through Mirkwood. That's when his bike light flickers. He sees something, a figure. It's terrifying. He crashes his bike and runs home, but nobody is there. The dog is barking at the shed. Will runs to the shed, loads a rifle, which is pretty brave for a kid his age, but the monster appears behind him. The light bulb glows blindingly bright, and poof. Will Byers vanishes. He's not dead, though. He's been pulled into the Upside Down. This is a dark, toxic mirror version of Hawkins. It's cold, there are spores everywhere, and that monster is hunting him. But Will is smart. He's small and he's good at hiding. He manages to evade the Demogorgon for a week. A whole week. He hides in the upside-down version of Castle Byers. Meanwhile, back in the real world, everyone is losing their minds looking for him. Joyce is convinced he's communicating through the lights, and she's right. She paints that iconic alphabet on the wall. Will, from the other side, touches the energy particles that correspond to the lights. He spells out R-U-N. It's terrifying, but it saves her life. Things get really bleak when a body is found in the quarry. Everyone thinks it's Will. They even have a funeral. But Joyce knows it's not him. And she's right, it's a fake body planted by Hawkins' lab. Eventually, 11, this telekinetic girl the boys found, helps locate Will in the void. She realizes he's stuck. Will is getting weaker. The air is toxic. He's cold. He sings "Should I Stay or Should I Go" to keep himself sane. Eventually, the monster finds him. It drags him to the library in the Upside Down, webs him to a wall, and sticks a tendril down his throat. It's gross and horrifying. He's basically being used as an incubator. Joyce and Hopper break into the Upside Down to save him. They find him, pull that snake thing out of his throat, and Hopper has to do CPR. There's this heart-stopping moment where you think he's gone, but he gasps. He's back. They get him to the hospital, and he wakes up surrounded by his friends. It's a happy ending, right? Well, sort of. He coughs up a slug in the sink a month later and sees the world flicker into the upside down. He's back, but he's not entirely free. A year passes. It's in '84. Will is dealing with some serious trauma. The kids at school call him Zombie Boy, which is just cruel. He's having these episodes where he freezes and sees the upside down. It's Halloween, and despite Joyce being super protective, she lets him go trick-or-treating with the guys. They're dressed as Ghostbusters. It's going okay until some bullies jump out and Will falls. He has another episode, but this time, it's not just a flash. He sees a shadow in the sky, a massive spider-like shadow monster. He tries to keep it a secret, but eventually he tells Mike. He says he feels like he's stuck between two worlds. Mike promises to help him. Then, taking some bad advice from Bob Newby, who is dating Joyce and is a total superhero in his own right, Will decides to stand his ground the next time he sees the monster. He thinks he can tell it to go away, so he's on the school field, the monster swirls down from the sky, and Will screams at it to leave. But the monster doesn't leave. It swarms into him. It possesses him. This kicks off the Spy Will era. The Mind Flayer, that shadow monster, is now using Will as a host. Will likes the cold. He knows things he shouldn't know. He draws these scribbles that act as a map of the tunnels the monsters are digging under Hawkins. But slowly, the monster takes over. When the soldiers from the lab try to burn the tunnels, Will collapses in agony because he feels what the hive mind feels. It's physically painful for him. He ends up in the hospital with memory loss. He barely recognizes anyone. It's heartbreaking. They realize the only way to save him is to get the monster out, but they can't hurt the monster without hurting Will. They take him to a disguised shed to interrogate him, trying to find the monster's weakness. The Mind Flayer takes full control, breaking his restraints and shouting that he's going to kill everyone. But the real Will is still in there. He taps out a message in Morse code on the chair, close gate. He's fighting from the inside. To save him, Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy take him to Hopper's remote cabin. They crank the heat up because the virus, the Mind Flayer, hates heat. It's an exorcism, basically. Will is screaming, choking Joyce, his veins are turning black. It's intense. Nancy pokes him with a hot poker, and finally the shadow monster flies out of his mouth and escapes into the night. Will collapses, but when he wakes up, he's himself again. He's finally free of the possession. He goes to the snowball dance, and a nice girl asks him to dance. For a minute, he gets to just be a kid. By the summer of 1985, though, things are changing. Will just wants to play D&D. He wants things to go back to how they were. But Mike and Lucas are obsessed with their girlfriends, Eleven and Max. Will feels left out. He feels like he's losing his friends to growing up. During a rainy day, he tries to get a campaign going, but Mike and Lucas are just not into it. Will snaps. He storms out and Mike yells, "It's not my fault you don't like girls." It's a harsh line and it hits Will hard. He goes home and destroys Castle Byers. He tears it down in the rain, sobbing. It's the symbolic end of his childhood. But he can't dwell on it because he feels the neck tingle. That feeling he gets when the Mind Flayer is near. He realizes the monster is back, even though the gate was closed. He becomes the group's early warning system. Every time the Mind Flayer is active, Will touches the back of his neck. They realize the Mind Flayer has built a physical body out of melted rats and people, the Meat Flayer. Will helps them track it, fight it, and eventually they win at the Starcourt Mall, but at a huge cost. Hopper supposedly dies. We know he doesn't, but they don't. And Billy dies. After all this trauma, Joyce decides enough is enough. The Byers family, plus 11, are moving to California. Will and Mike promise to stay in touch, but there's this distance growing between them. So now we are in 19X Season 4. Will is in Lenora Hills, California. He's painted this painting for Mike, but he won't show anyone. He's clearly struggling with his identity and his feelings for Mike. Mike comes to visit for spring break, and it's awkward. Will is third-wheeling hard while Mike and Elle are doing their thing. They go to the roller rink and Elle gets bullied. It's a disaster. But then the military shows up, looking for Elle. The California crew, Will, Mike, Jonathan, and his stoner friend Argyle, go on the run in a pizza van. This road trip is pivotal for Will. There's this moment in the van where he shows Mike the painting. It's the party fighting a dragon, and Mike is the leader, the heart. Will gives this speech, ostensibly about 11 needing Mike, but if you listen to the subtext, he's talking about himself. He's crying, looking out the window, and Mike doesn't even see it. It is devastatingly sad. Jonathan sees it though. Later, Jonathan gives Will a pep talk, basically saying, "I love you no matter what," without explicitly saying, "I know you're gay," but he knows. It's a sweet brother moment. They eventually track down Eleven, who has been getting her powers back. They pick her up and head back toward Hawkins because Vecna, this new humanoid villain who is actually Henry Creel/1, is destroying the town. They don't make it back in time to fight physically, so they help El mind fight Vecna from a pizza dough freezer. They return to Hawkins to find it in ruins. The Upside Down is bleeding into the real world. Will stands there looking at the spores falling like snow, and he touches his neck. He tells Mike, "He's not dead, I can feel him." Okay, hey, pause for a sec. Imagine I'm Dustin trying to contact Susie. I need you to pick up. So hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment telling me which hairstyle of Will's was the worst. It's the bowl cut. We all know it's the bowl cut. All right, back to the end of the world. So here we are, Season 5. It's November 1987. We are picking up right where the chaos left off. Hawkins is under quarantine. The military has locked it down. They've put these giant metal band-aids over the cracks in the earth. The group is split up but working together. There's a radio station called WSQK, the Squawk, that Robin is running. They're using it to coordinate. Will is living at the Wheeler's house because the buyer's old house is probably destroyed or inaccessible. He's sleeping on a pull-out couch. He's still having these feelings, these connections to Vecna. It starts with him just freezing up, seeing the sky spin. He brushes it off, tells Mike he's just nervous, but we know better. Here is where it gets wild. The military is doing these crawls into the Upside Down to try and hunt Vecna. Hopper is leading them, but they aren't finding anything. Meanwhile, Will's connection is getting stronger. He's not just sensing Vecna, he's seeing through his eyes. Or more accurately, he's seeing through the eyes of the hive mind. One night, while the group is trying to track a military convoy that Hopper has infiltrated, things go wrong. A Demogorgon attacks the convoy. At the exact same moment, Will collapses at the radio station. He's seizing, screaming that he sees him. He is psychically witnessing Hopper's fight and sees the Demogorgon ripping the driver out of the van. This confirms that Will is basically a human antenna. Will tells Joyce after he wakes up that it knows he's there, referring to the hive mind sensing Hopper. But at the Wheeler house, little Holly Wheeler, Mike and Nancy's younger sister, has been seeing this friend she calls Mr. Whatsit. Turns out, Mr. Whatsit is Henry Creel in human form, appearing to her like a friendly ghost. He lures her in. That night, a Demogorgon bursts through the ceiling of Holly's bedroom. It is chaos. Karen Wheeler tries to fight it off with a broken wine bottle, total badass move, but she gets badly hurt. Ted tries to help and gets thrown through a wall. The Demogorgon grabs Holly and drags her into the Upside Down through a rift in the floor. Nancy, Mike, and the others arrive just too late. They find Karen bleeding out. She manages to write a name on a clipboard later at the hospital. Henry. This changes everything. They realize Vecna is targeting kids, specifically enticing them using a gentle human persona, rather than just being a monster. In episode 2, the group is reeling. Will realizes that he can use his connection to find her. He tells Joyce and Robin that he's like a radio receiver. Robin actually helps him conceptualize this, suggesting that if he has an antenna, he just needs to get close enough to the radio waves, the Mind Flayer particles, to get a clear signal instead of static. He takes Robin into the woods to a spot where he had a vision earlier. On the way, Robin awkwardly asks Will if he was at the hospital because she almost got caught visiting Vicky, hinting she knows Will might have secrets too, and they share a moment of understanding about keeping things quiet. He sees a mandala made of stones, which Robin points out is actually a spiral, not a mandala. He goes into a trance and sees what Holly sees. She's with Henry Creel in this pristine, beautiful version of the Creel house. It's a trap, obviously. Henry's keeping her there, manipulating her, telling her he's protecting her from the monsters. Will realizes he wasn't seeing through the Demogorgon's eyes, but through Holly's, meaning Vecna is watching her and is with her. The group realizes Vecna is escalating. He plans to take more. In episode 3, Will is riding in the car with Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy. Joyce is furious that Will went into the woods without her, but Will stands his ground, telling her he isn't a kid anymore, and that they don't have time to play it safe. He reveals that because he tapped into the hive mind, he knows Vecna's plan. Will taps into the hive mind again and sees the next target, a kid named Derek Turnbow. Derek is a bully, kind of a jerk, but he doesn't deserve to be Monster Chow. The group hatches a wild plan. They are going to kidnap Derek. Yeah, you heard that right. They figure if they can drug him and get him to a secure location, they can set a trap for the Demogorgon that comes to collect him. Steve questions the ethics of kidnapping a child, but Joyce defends it as saving a child via kidnapping. They recruit Erica Sinclair to help because she knows Derek's sister. They actually have to negotiate with Erica in a school hallway. She only agrees when Mike admits it's about saving Holly. Erica goes to the Turnbow house for dinner, brings a pie laced with sedatives, benzos that Robin and Will stole from the hospital earlier, and knocks the whole family out. Though Tina, the sister, refuses the pie, so Erica just straight up jabs her with a syringe. They grab Derek and take him to an abandoned barn at the McCorkle farm. They set up traps, Home Alone style, but deadlier. They've got tracking devices hidden inside shotgun shells they plan to shoot into the Demogorgon so they can follow it back to Vecna's lair. Outside the barn, Joyce and Will have a massive heart-to-heart. Joyce confesses she feels guilty about the night Will was taken in Season 1 because she was home watching Cheers and didn't check on him for 8 hours. She promises not to look away again, and Will assures her he trusts her. At the barn, they wake Derek up. He's freaking out, understandably. He tries to escape, climbs into the hayloft, and starts yelling insults at the group. This noise attracts the Demogorgon way faster than they anticipated. The monster bursts in. It's a massive brawl. Joyce hits it with an axe. Steve slams into it with his BMW. The monster retreats through a gate, and Steve, being Steve, decides to drive his car through the gate into the Upside Down to chase it. He has a theory that the gate is like a peanut butter bopper, crunchy on the outside, soft on the inside, and that if he hits it fast enough, he can punch through. Nancy, Jonathan, and Dustin are with him. They crash land in the Upside Down, alive but stranded. Meanwhile, back in the Upside Down, Hopper and Eleven are on their own mission. They've infiltrated a military base inside the Upside Down. Yeah, the military has a base in the Shadow Dimension. They find out that the military isn't just fighting monsters, they are rounding up kids too. They think 11 is the one taking them, so they are putting kids in protective custody, which is actually just making them sitting ducks. Hopper and Elle break into the lab to find out what's going on. They find Dr. K, this intense new antagonist who is running the show. There's a massive fight. Hopper almost gets strangled by a vine creature, but Elle saves him. They find a vault that supposedly holds Vecna, but when they open it, it's Kaylee. 8, 11's sister from the Chicago episode back in Season 2. She's wired up to a machine. That is a massive twist nobody saw coming. Back at the barn in the real world, Will is having a breakdown. He starts painting on the wall. It's a vision he's seeing. He realizes Vecna is building something. He sees spires. Holly is attached to one. There are 12 spires total. Vecna wants 12 kids. He's building an army or a battery. Derek, who is eating chips on the couch, reveals he saw soldiers loading other kids onto buses, confirming the military is also rounding them up. The military raids the barn. They arrest Joyce, Will, Mike, and Derek. But before they can take them away, the Demogorgons attack the military. It's a slaughter. Rifts start opening up everywhere, and then he walks out. Vecna, but he looks different. He's evolved. The soldiers shoot him, and he just brushes it off. He tosses Joyce aside like a ragdoll. Then Vecna turns his attention to Will. He lifts Will into the air with his mind. He gives this monologue about how Will was the first, how Will showed him what was possible, and that Will's mind belongs in the Upside Down because some minds don't belong in the normal world. It looks like he's going to kill him or take him, but then Vecna drops him. He just lets him go and retreats back into the portal. It's confusing, but here's the absolute mic drop moment of Volume 1. The Demogorgons are still attacking. One is coming for Robin, one is coming for Lucas, one is coming for Mike. It looks like game over. The camera cuts to Will. He's on the ground bleeding. He hears Robin's voice in his head, remembering a conversation they had in the tunnels earlier about accepting who you are and how Robin realized she had to stop being scared of herself to be free. We see flashbacks of Will's life, the swings, the castle, the wizard costume. Will stands up. He looks at the Demogorgons. His eyes roll back in his head, turning completely white. He raises his hand, just like Vecna does. The Demogorgons stop midair, they freeze. Will is controlling them. He twists his hand and the monster's limbs snap. Their bodies contort. He crushes them with his mind exactly the way Vecna crushed his victims. Will collapses, his nose bleeding, just like 11. Will Byers has powers. He is a sorcerer. The connection to the Upside Down didn't just traumatize him, it changed him. He is now the equal to Vecna. Wilbur managed to survive the Upside Down, but he didn't come back alone. He brought a connection with him, a link to a hive mind that wanted to consume everything in its path. Will was just the vessel. Now we need to talk about the puppet master that haunted him. This is the entire story of the Mind Flayer. When we first get a real look at this thing in Season 2, it's absolutely terrifying. After Will Byers is rescued from the Upside Down, he keeps having these now memories, flashing into the Upside Down, which now has this thing in the sky. A colossal, spider-like creature made of swirling black particles and red lightning, towering 50 stories high. Dustin gives it the perfect Dungeons & Dragons name, the Mind Flayer, a monster that controls the minds of others, and that's exactly what it does. It's the big boss, the king of the Upside Down, and everything there, the Demogorgons, the vines, all of it, is connected to it in one giant hive mind. And now, it wants Hawkins. Its first move is to infect Will. It shoots a tendril of its shadow self right into him on the school field and slowly begins to take him over. This is, in my opinion, one of the creepiest parts of the whole show. Will becomes the Mind Flayer's spy. He can see what the monster sees, but the monster can also see what he sees. He thinks he's helping the guys at the lab, but he's just a puppet, leading them right into a trap for the Demodogs. The gang realizes the only way to fight this thing is to use its own weakness against it. Since it's all one connected mind, if they hurt a part of the network, like the vines in the tunnels, the center feels it, and Will, being possessed, feels it too. They figure out its big weakness is heat. So they drag Will to Hopper's cabin, crank every heater they can find, and basically perform an exorcism, turning the place into a sauna to literally burn the creature out of him. It's brutal, but it works. A puff of black smoke, the particle fragment of the Mind Flayer, flies out of Will's mouth and escapes into the night. It doesn't die, it just flees, finding a new place to hide. The abandoned Brimborn Steelworks. At the same time, Eleven musters all her strength and seals the Mother Gate at Hawkins' lab. With the main door closed, the psychic link is severed. All the Demodogs and Hawkins instantly drop dead. The Mind Flayer is cut off, banished back to its own dimension. But as we see in that final shot of the snowball, it's still there, looming over the upside-down version of the school, and it is furious. It's just waiting for a way back in. And in Season 3, it gets one, thanks to the Russians. Deep under the new Starcourt Mall, a team of Soviet scientists builds a massive machine they call the Key, and they successfully blast open another gate to the Upside Down. It's not as big as the Mother Gate, but it's enough. The psychic link is reestablished. That little puff of smoke that was lying dormant at the steel mill, it wakes up. This is where the Mind Flayer gets, for my money, 1,000 times grosser. It can't just project its giant shadow body into Hawkins, so it has to improvise. It needs a physical body. It starts with rats. It possesses hundreds of rats, drawing them to the steel mill and has them eat chemicals, fertilizer, bleach, all sorts of toxic waste-looking stuff, and then they explode. They melt into these pulsating puddles of biomass. It's absolutely disgusting. But rats aren't enough. It needs a real host, a main servant to help it build an army. And it finds the perfect one, Billy Hargrove. It attacks Billy's car, drags him into the steel mill, and infects him, turning him into the first of the Flayed. Billy's job is to recruit. He kidnaps his coworker, Heather, and brings her to the monster. She's flayed. Then they get her parents, Tom and Janet. Then Bruce, the sleazy reporter. Then old Mrs. Driscoll. All these people become part of the hive mind, and just like the rats, they are forced to consume chemicals to, I guess, break down their bodies and make them more meltable? The kids eventually figure out something is terrifyingly wrong with Billy. The sauna test is a dead giveaway, and they realize the Mind Flayer is back. This whole season, the monster is playing a proxy war. It's not personally there, but its will is, and it's building something. Eventually, it calls all the Flayed, except Billy, to the mill. They all dissolve, melting into this horrific-looking goo, and merge with the original rat slurry to create a new, physical proxy monster. This spider monster, made of the melted flesh and bone of dozens of Hawkins residents, is the Mind Flayer's new body on Earth, and it has one single-minded goal: kill Eleven. Why? Because she's the only one who can close the gate and stop it for good. This all leads to the Battle of Starcourt Mall. The monster is a tank, shrugging off everything they throw at it. It manages to bite Eleven, leaving a piece of itself in her leg, which is what I believe causes her to lose her powers. It finally corners her, and just as it's about to kill her, Billy, its main soldier, steps in. In a last-ditch effort, Eleven had used her fading powers to psychically connect with Billy's mind, not the monster's, reminding him of his past, of his mother. And it worked. The real Billy breaks through, just for a moment, and sacrifices himself to save Eleven and Max. While this is happening, Joyce and Hopper are in the Russian base, destroying the key. The machine explodes, the gate closes, and the psychic link is severed again. Just like the Demodogs, the giant flesh monster in the mall instantly collapses, now just an inert, horrifying statue of melted people. So, for 3 seasons, we're all on the same page. The Mind Flayer is the big boss. It's the evil entity, the god of the Upside Down. Then Season 4 comes along and introduces Vecna. At first, Dustin's theory makes total sense. Vecna is the Mind Flayer's 5-star general. He's a powerful new soldier, but still just a soldier serving the big shadow spider. And then, Vecna traps Nancy in his mind lair and drops the single biggest plot twist of the entire series. We were all wrong. Completely wrong. Vecna is Henry Creel, Dr. Brenner's #1. When Eleven overpowered him and banished him in 1979, she didn't just send him to the Upside Down we know. She blasted him into this primordial dimension, a wasteland of mountains and red lightning. He wandered this realm and what did he find? That swirling, storm-like mass of silver-black particles. The exact thing we call the Mind Flayer. But here's the thing, it was just dormant, or at least it had no shape, no direction. Henry Creel, using his own immense psychic powers, reached out and connected to it. He molded it. He gave it the giant, spider-like form, the same shape he had been obsessed with and drawing ever since he was a child. The Mind Flayer isn't the boss. It's Vecna's weapon. It's his puppet. When Will was possessed in Season 2, he kept saying he. He's angry. He told me to do it. We all thought he was the monster, but as Will realizes in Season 4, he was Vecna all along. Vecna was controlling him through the Mind Flayer. This changes everything. The focused attack on Hawkins, the desperate need to kill Eleven, the creation of the flesh monster, that was all Vecna all along using the Mind Flayer as his tool. This even recontextualizes the Russia plot in Season 4. Hopper discovers the Soviets also captured a piece of the Mind Flayer particles, which they called the Shadow, along with a bunch of Demodogs. When those particles get loose, they possess the creatures. And when Hopper and Joyce kill those possessed Demogorgons with a sword and a flamethrower, it hurts Vecna back in Hawkins. Why? Because it's all one big organism. Damaging any part of the hive mind damages the center, Vecna. But wait, because the Duffer Brothers love making our heads spin, there's one more piece to this, thanks to the Stranger Things stage play, The First Shadow. This play suggests that Henry's own story might not be the whole truth. It reveals that in the 1950s, when Henry was just a kid, his family was part of an early government experiment in Nevada. This experiment accidentally transported young Henry to that same Dimension X for 12 hours. When he returned, his blood was changed, his personality was darker, and that's when he got his powers. The heavy implication is that he was infected or influenced by that same shadowy particle entity back then. It suggests that the entity was the source of his powers and was the one forcing him to kill the animals in his family, making him think it was his own idea. The play even shows the entity talking to Henry in his mind, taking on the form of Dr. Brenner. So this creates a massive, complicated chicken and the egg problem. Did Henry Creel find the Mind Flayer and shape it into his weapon? Or did the Mind Flayer find a powerful, angry little boy, create Vecna, and has been manipulating him this whole time, making him think he's the one in charge? The show's creators have called their relationship ambiguous and fractious and said they are both vying for dominance. Personally, I think the second theory is way scarier. It means Vecna thinks he's the king, but he might just be the Mind Flayer's 5-star general after all, just like Dustin originally said. The Mind Flayer is an entity that seems impossible to stop, but nature loves balance. For every ultimate evil, there is an ultimate weapon. While the darkness was growing beneath Hawkins, a girl was being raised in a lab to fight it. Our story starts way back in the 70s with a college student named Terry Ives. Terry, in a move that would unknowingly change the world, signed up for a government experiment run by the charmingly sinister Dr. Martin Brenner. This program, MKUltra, was all about pushing the limits of the human mind, using psychedelics and sensory deprivation. But here's the thing, Terry was pregnant. The experiments, which may have even involved a transfusion of blood from another powerful psychic, had a massive effect on her unborn child. On June 7th, 19 Terry gave birth to a baby girl she named Jane. But she barely got a glimpse of her before Brenner and his goons swooped in, stole the baby, and covered the whole thing up as a miscarriage. Terry knew her daughter was alive. She fought like hell, even suing Brenner. But with no birth certificate, no medical records, it was like Jane Ives never existed. In Brenner's hands, Jane ceased to be Jane. She became Subject 011 or 11. He raised her in the sterile, cold environment of Hawkins National Laboratory, forcing her to call him Papa. It's a twisted, abusive dynamic where he's both her captor and the only father figure she's ever known. She wasn't alone, though. There were other kids, her brothers and sisters, in this twisted experiment, all with their own numbers, all playing together in the now infamous Rainbow Room. One of these kids was Callie, number 8, who would become important later. But for the most part, Elle's childhood was a series of grueling tests designed to exploit and strengthen her incredible psychokinetic abilities. Failure meant punishment, often being locked in a solitary confinement cell, a trauma that would leave her with a deep-seated fear of being trapped. There was one particularly horrific test where Brenner wanted her to kill a cat with her mind. She refused, and in the struggle against the guards dragging her to the cell, her rage boiled over and she snapped one of their necks. It was a terrifying display of power, and while Elle was horrified, you could see the glint of satisfaction in Papa's eyes. He had his weapon. In 1909, there was a friendly orderly at the lab who took a special liking to 8-year-old Elle. He was kind, encouraging, and told her to use a memory that makes her sad or angry to make her powers stronger. He was the first person who seemed to genuinely care. He saw her getting bullied by the other kids, especially the arrogant number 2. This orderly, we would later learn, was not just some nice guy. He was Henry Creel, Dr. Brenner's very first test subject, number 1. He had a chip in his neck, a little device called Soteria that suppressed his powers. He manipulated poor, lonely 11, telling her that Brenner was lying and the other kids were planning to kill her. He gave her a key card and a plan to escape, but first he needed her to do him a little favor. Use her powers to remove the chip. She did, and all hell broke loose. The second that chip came out, the friendly orderly was gone and the monster, 1, was unleashed. He went on a horrifying rampage, slaughtering every single person in the lab, guards, scientists, and all of Elle's brothers and sisters. It was a bloodbath. 11 walked into the Rainbow Room to find him standing over the body of number 2, a scene of absolute carnage. He then revealed his true identity and his nihilistic philosophy, a deep hatred for humanity. He saw himself and 11 as predators, superior beings destined to reshape a broken world. He asked her to join him, and in that moment, this terrified 8-year-old girl refused. She told him, "You are the monster." An epic psychokinetic duel broke out between them. He was stronger, more experienced, and nearly killed her. But just as her life was fading, she tapped into a precious memory, a memory of her mother holding her as a baby, and a surge of power, fueled by love, not hate, overwhelmed him. She pinned him to the wall, and with a final, desperate scream, she disintegrated him, accidentally tearing a hole in the fabric of reality, the very first gate to the Upside Down, and banishing him into the hellish dimension. The effort knocked her into a coma, and when she woke up, the trauma had buried the memory of the massacre deep, deep down, leaving her with blunted powers and a gaping hole in her past. Brenner, finding her as the sole survivor, was baffled, but also saw the immense potential she had just unlocked. 4 years fly by. It's November 6, 1983. Brenner is now using Elle's powers for Cold War espionage. He pushes her to spy on a Russian agent, but during one of these psychic projections in a sensory deprivation tank, she stumbles upon something else. A creature from another dimension. Intrigued, Brenner forces her to make contact again. This time, as she psychically touches the creature we'd come to know as the Demogorgon, the connection is so powerful it rips open a new, stable gate right there in the lab wall. Chaos ensues, and amidst the panic, 11 escapes through a drain pipe, tasting freedom for the very first time. She's lost, scared, and hungry when she stumbles into Benny's diner. Benny feeds her and tries to help, but his call to social services is intercepted by the lab. Agent Connie Fraser shows up, shoots Benny dead, and 11 is on the run again. That night, in the pouring rain, her path crosses with 3 boys on a mission to find their missing friend, Will Byers. Mike, Lucas, and Dustin find this strange, silent girl in the woods, and, against their better judgment, Mike takes her home and hides her in his basement. He gives her the nickname Elle, and, most importantly, he gives her Egos. This is where her life truly begins. She starts to learn about friendship, trust, and home. It's clunky and awkward at first. She's terrified of adults, speaks in broken sentences, and when Lucas wants to tell Mike's mom about her, she slams the door shut with her mind, revealing her powers to the boys. Using their Dungeons & Dragons board, she shows them where Will is in the Upside Down, a dark echo of their world, and he's being hunted by the monster. Mike gives her a makeover with a blonde wig and Nancy's pink dress, so she can use the powerful Heathkit radio at their school. It's here she has her first real brush with the outside world, including a run-in with the school bully, Troy. After Troy makes a cruel joke about Will, Mike shoves him. When Troy lunges at Mike, Elle freezes him in his tracks and makes him wet his pants in front of everyone. It's satisfying payback, but her powers are draining, and they often come with a cost. A fight breaks out between Mike and Lucas when Lucas accuses her of sabotaging their search for the gate, which, to be fair, she was, to keep them safe from the lab. In a flash of emotion, she flings Lucas across a junkyard with her mind and runs away, convinced she's the monster everyone thinks she is. It's Mike who finds her, just as Troy and his buddy are forcing him to jump off a cliff into the quarry. In one of the most iconic scenes of the entire series, Elle appears. She levitates Mike safely back to the cliff's edge, breaks Troy's arm with a sickening crack, and collapses. Mike rushes to her, holds her, and tells her, "You saved me." He reassures her that she's not the monster. It's the validation she's needed her entire life. They all reconcile and eventually team up with Joyce, Jonathan, Nancy, and Chief Hopper. They build a makeshift sensory deprivation tank in the middle school gym to amplify her powers. Floating in the saltwater, she enters the psychic void and finds Will, barely alive, hiding in his upside-down version of Castle Byers. She also finds Barb's body, a grim confirmation of her fate. Back in the school, exhausted, Mike asks her to the snowball, the school dance, and in a sweet, fumbling exchange, they share their first kiss. But the quiet is shattered. Hopper, in a deal to save Will, gave up her location. Lab agents storm the school. Eleven, protecting her friends, unleashes her full fury, crushing their brains internally until blood streams from their eyes. The effort nearly kills her. Just as Brenner corners them, the Demogorgon, attracted by the blood, smashes through the wall. In the final, desperate confrontation, Eleven pins the creature against a blackboard. She looks at a terrified Mike, says, "Goodbye, Mike," and with one last monumental effort, she disintegrates the monster, vanishing along with it. But she wasn't gone. She awoke in the upside-down version of the school. She found the portal the Demogorgon had made and managed to squeeze her way back into our world, but she couldn't go back to Mike. The bad men were everywhere. For a month, she survived alone in the woods, a feral, resourceful survivor. Eventually, she realized the food and Eggos being left in a box in the woods were from Chief Hopper. Cautiously, she revealed herself, and he took her in. He brought her to his grandfather's old, secluded cabin, a safe house where they could hide. This is where her story takes another beautiful, complicated turn. She becomes a daughter, Hopper sets rules, teaches her Morse code, and tries, in his gruff, broken way, to be a father. But it's hard. Elle is essentially a teenager with superpowers and immense trauma, cooped up in a tiny cabin. She wants to see Mike, especially on Halloween. Hopper says no. The tension builds until one night, after he's late again, she uses the TV static to visit Mike in the void. He's in his basement Ford, calling for her on his radio. It's been 352 days. He hasn't given up. It breaks her heart. Her patience finally snaps. She defies Hopper's rules and sneaks out to the school. She sees Mike in the gym, and her heart soars. Until she sees him with another girl, a new student named Mac, she feels a twinge of jealousy, an emotion she has never experienced before. In a fit of pique, she uses her powers to trip Max on her skateboard and then flees, heartbroken. This leads to a massive blowout fight with Hopper. In a rage, she shatters every window in the cabin with a psychic scream. Later, while cleaning up, she finds a box of old files from the lab. Inside, she finds her mother's name, Terry Ives. Using the void, she finds her mother, catatonic in a chair, endlessly repeating a sequence of words. Elle travels to her mother's home and, through a psychic connection, experiences Terry's memories. The birth, the abduction, and the brutal electroshock therapy Brenner used to silence her, which left her in her current state. In those memories, she sees another little girl in the rainbow room with her Kali. Believing this is where her mother wants her to go, Elle runs away again, hopping a bus to Chicago. She finds Kali, number 8, living with a gang of punk outcasts. Kali's power is different. She can create illusions, make people see things that aren't there. For a moment, Elle finds a home, a sister. Kali teaches her to channel her anger, to use her pain to make her powers stronger. They go on a revenge mission against one of the lab orderlies who tortured her mother. But when the moment comes, when Elle is choking him with her mind, she sees a picture of his children. She can't do it. She's not a killer. This is the difference between her and Kali, and between her and one. She chooses mercy. As the police close in on their hideout, Elle uses the void to check on her friends back in Hawkins and sees them in terrible danger at the lab, surrounded by demodogs. Mike is there. Hopper is there. They need her. She leaves Kali and her crew behind, choosing her found family, and heads back home. Her return is nothing short of legendary. Just as the heroes are about to be overrun by demodogs at the Byers house, the door unlocks, and there she stands. She's back. After a tearful reunion with Mike, they hatch a plan. Joyce and Jonathan will try to burn the Mind Flayer out of Will, while Elle and Hopper will go back to the lab to close the gate. In the car, she and Hopper finally have the talk they desperately needed. He apologizes for being overprotective, explaining his fear of losing her like he lost his own daughter, Sarah. They forgive each other. At the lab, they descend into the abyss beneath the facility to the massive, pulsing heart of the Upside Down's invasion. As Hopper fends off a swarm of demodogs, 11 channels all her pain, all her anger, all her love, and with a deafening scream, she forces the gate shut, severing the Mind Flayer's connection to its army. A month later, Dr. Owens provides Hopper with a forged birth certificate. She is officially Jane Hopper, and for one night, she gets to be a normal kid. She attends the snowball. Mike, stunned, tells her she looks beautiful. They dance to Every Breath You Take and say it's, and they share a perfect, happy kiss. But far below, in the Upside Down, the Mind Flayer looms over the school, and it hasn't forgotten her. Fast forward to the summer of 1985. Elle and Mike are inseparable, much to Hopper's chagrin. Their constant makeout sessions drive him crazy. After a failed attempt at a heart-to-heart, Hopper just straight up threatens Mike into staying away for a bit. Confused and hurt by Mike's sudden distance, Elle turns to the one person who might understand. Mac. This is the beginning of one of the show's best friendships. Max teaches Elle about boys, fashion, and independence. They have a glorious shopping spree at the new Starcourt Mall, and when they run into the boys, Elle, feeling empowered, dumps Mike on the spot. Later, during a sleepover, they use Elle's powers to spy on people, eventually landing on Max's abusive stepbrother, Billy. But when Elle finds him in the void, something is terribly wrong. She hears screaming, and he senses her presence. This kicks off the new mystery. Billy has been taken by the Mind Flayer, becoming its new host. The girls, along with the boys, trap Billy in the pool sauna to prove it. The possessed Billy breaks out with superhuman strength and nearly kills Elle before Mike saves her, and she hurls Billy through a brick wall. The group realizes the Mind Flayer is back and is flaying people all over town, melting them down to build a new, physical body. After a gruesome fight at the hospital against a monster made of two melted-down people, Elle dives deep into Billy's mind to find the source. She sees his traumatic childhood, the abuse from his father, the day his mother left. She feels pity for him, but the Mind Flayer finds her there, trapping her in a psychic projection and revealing its plan: to kill her, then her friends, then everyone. The giant spider monster, built from the flesh of the flayed, attacks the cabin. Elle fights it off, but not before a piece of its tendril gets lodged in her leg, a festering piece of the monster itself. At the mall, after Jonathan fails to cut it out, Elle, in an agonizing scene, uses her own powers to rip the piece from her flesh. The effort is so immense, so traumatic, that it seems to burn out her powers completely. She's powerless. The final battle for Starcourt is a nightmare. Without her powers, Elle is vulnerable. The spider monster corners them in the mall. Billy, under the Flayer's control, kidnaps her and offers her to the Beast. But at the last second, by reminding him of his mother, of that happy day on the beach, Elle breaks through the Mind Flayer's control. In a final act of redemption, Billy sacrifices himself to save her. At the same time, deep below the mall, Joyce is forced to turn the key to destroy the Russians' gate-opening machine, seemingly disintegrating Hopper in the process. The spider monster collapses, its connection to the Mind Flayer severed. In the following moments, Elle realizes Hopper is gone. Her father is gone. 3 months later, a still powerless Eleven is taken in by the Byers family. Joyce gives her the heart-to-heart speech Hopper had written down. Reading his words, learning just how much he loved her, she breaks down. She says a tearful goodbye to her friends and moves with the Byers to Lenora Hills, California for a fresh start. The fresh start is anything but. It's now 1986. Going by Jane, she's trying to survive high school, without powers, without Hopper, and without her friends. She's a total outcast, mercilessly bullied by a popular girl named Angela. She lies in her letters to Mike, pretending she's thriving. When Mike visits for spring break, the lies fall apart at a roller rink when Angela and her friends humiliate Elle, leading her to finally snap and smash a roller skate into Angela's face. The act lands her in police custody, but she's intercepted by Dr. Owens. Dr. Owens, he tells her Hawkins is in danger again. A new evil is killing teenagers, and he has a way to get her powers back. It's a top-secret project called Nina. She agrees, desperate to help, only to discover with horror that the project is being co-run by a very much alive Dr. Brenner. Trapped, she's forced into the Nina tank, which immerses her in her own repressed memories from the lab. She relives her childhood there, the bullying, the tests, and slowly, the truth of the 1979 massacre begins to surface. She remembers the friendly, orderly Henry Creel, number 1. She remembers how he manipulated her, how he committed the massacre, and the epic battle where she defeated him and banished him to the Upside Down. She realizes that this new evil in Hawkins, the creature they're calling Vecna, is him. It's one. Reliving the trauma finally unlocks her powers, restoring them to a level stronger than ever before. But just as she's ready to go back, Brenner wants to keep pushing her, believing she's not ready. At the same time, a hot-headed military colonel, Sullivan, who believes Elle is the cause of all of Hawkins' problems, launches a full-scale assault on the Nina facility. Brenner is shot trying to escape with her. In his dying moments, he asks for her forgiveness. She gives him a complicated goodbye but denies him the comfort he seeks. Just then, Mike, Will, Jonathan, and their new friend Argyle arrive in a pizza van to rescue her. They can't get to Hawkins in time to stop Vecna's plan. Max has offered herself up as bait. So, in the back of a Surfer Boy pizza, they create a makeshift sensory deprivation tank using a freezer and a whole lot of salt. Elle piggybacks into Max's mind to fight Vecna on the psychic plane. She finds Max in a memory of the snowball, but Vecna corrupts it into a nightmare. They engage in a furious battle of minds, but Vecna is too strong. He overpowers both of them, pinning them in his mindscape. He reveals his grand plan. He's been the one pulling the strings all along. The Demogorgons, the Mind Flayer, they were all his puppets, tools he found and shaped in the Upside Down. Just as he's about to kill Max, Mike's voice breaks through from the real world. He finally tells her he loves her. That love gives her the strength she needs. She breaks free and blasts Vecna, but it's too late. He's already broken Max's limbs and stopped her heart. In the real world, Max dies for 1 full minute. Her death is the 4th and final sacrifice Vecna needs. 4 gates rip across Hawkins, converging in the town center, unleashing the Upside Down. But in the void, Elle refuses to let her friend go. She places her hands on Max's chest and uses her powers somehow to restart her heart. 2 days later, they arrive back in a devastated Hawkins. The Upside Down is bleeding into their world. Max is in a coma at the hospital, and when Elle tries to find her in the void, there's nothing there, just darkness. Will, with his lingering connection to the Upside Down, can feel that Vecna is still alive, hurt but not dead. The story ends with the group standing on a hill overlooking their broken town, watching as ominous red clouds gather, and spores from the Upside Down begin to fall like snow. The war is far from over, but one thing is certain. Eleven is back, stronger than ever, and she's ready to fight. This is the entire story of Eleven. Eleven is powerful, but we learned the hard way that she wasn't the first. We thought Henry Creel was the king who created the Upside Down, but he was living a lie. It began with a rock in the Nevada desert where the particles consumed a child's humanity and led him believe he was in control. This is the entire story of Vecna. So let's start at the very beginning, because the beginning is way more complicated than most people realize. Henry was born sometime between 1905 and 1950 to Victor and Virginia Creel, and he had a sister named Alice. From day one, this kid didn't fit in. His own father described him as sensitive, which back in the 1950s wasn't exactly a compliment for a boy. His teachers and doctors apparently told his parents that he was broken. That kind of messaging does something to a person, and I think it's important to keep that in mind as we trace Henry's descent into becoming a literal monster. Here's where things get really interesting, and honestly a bit confusing because the show gives us multiple accounts of what happened. The Creel family lived in Rachel, Nevada, near Lincoln County, before they ever moved to Hawkins, around Henry's 8th birthday. Probably 1953, he was out exploring a cave system with his Captain Midnight spyglass because of course this weird little kid was into spy stuff and codes. He was apparently really good with ciphers, even winning a radio for cracking a Captain Midnight code graph. So we've got this intelligent, isolated, misunderstood kid wandering around caves by himself, and that's when everything changed. In that mineshaft, Henry stumbled upon a wounded, bleeding man clutching a silver briefcase. This wasn't just any random guy. This was a Soviet spy who had been stationed at a nearby military base in Nevada where Dr. Martin Brenner and other scientists were conducting early experiments in interdimensional travel. They knew travel to another dimension was possible because of something called the USS Eldridge incident from 1943, which is a whole other rabbit hole involving Project Rainbow in the Abyss. The spy had stolen a briefcase containing something that Brenner later described as something from beyond our world, probably something that originated from the Abyss. Now, instead of running away, Henry offers to help him. And how does the spy respond? He shoots at Henry's hand. Acting on his survival instincts, Henry grabbed a rock and attacked the man, apparently killing him. This is crucial because it shows us that even as a child, Henry had the capacity for violence when pushed. But here's the thing that really matters. He then opened the briefcase out of curiosity. According to one account, opening that briefcase transported Henry to the Abyss, that same alternate dimension connected to the Eldridge incident. There, he saw glimpses of strange creatures and was exposed to the influence of a shadowy entity. He then used his powers for the first time to kill the scientist. Henry survived and returned home after 12 hours, but he was completely changed. He now possessed a unique blood type and an altered personality. Brenner later recovered the stolen equipment and found Henry's spyglass, which is how he eventually tracked the kid down. This is where we need to talk about one of the biggest reveals from Season 5 that completely recontextualizes everything we thought we knew. The Mind Flayer didn't just happen to find Henry later in life. The Mind Flayer infected Henry as a child in that cave. Will Byers figured this out, and it's a game changer. The entity blocked Henry's memory of the truth after seeing it, which explains why Henry's own account of events differs so dramatically from what actually happened. Henry genuinely believed he discovered and shaped the Mind Flayer as an adult, but the reality is that he was a victim and a vessel from the very beginning. Think about that for a second. The kid was 8 years old. He was already considered broken by the adults in his life, already isolated and struggling to connect with his peers, and then he gets infected by an interdimensional parasitic entity that starts manipulating his mind and memories. When people ask whether Henry Creel deserves sympathy or if he's pure evil, this is the context that matters. Was he ever really making his own choices, or was the Mind Flayer pulling strings from the moment those particles entered his gunshot wound? After the cave incident, Henry apparently lost control and paralyzed another boy, which was one factor in the Creels deciding to leave Nevada. At some point between 1907 and October 1959, Virginia's great-uncle died and left her a small fortune, which they used to buy a large house in the small town of Hawkins, Indiana. Victor and Virginia hoped the move could be a fresh start for their troubled son, but Henry was pessimistic. He didn't see how Hawkins would be different from anywhere else. But something unexpected happened. Henry found comfort when he discovered a nest of black widows living inside the new house's bathroom vent. This detail is so important for understanding his psychology. He related to the spiders because they were misunderstood, and he saw them as the most important of all predators because they provided structure for the weak. He started making illustrations of a fantastical super predator, envisioning a giant spider-like beast. Sound familiar? That's the Mind Flayer. Henry was already conceptualizing the form that the entity would eventually take, years before he consciously shaped it in the Upside Down. Was this his own imagination, or was the Mind Flayer guiding his thoughts even then? According to Henry's own telling of events, which we now know isn't entirely reliable, he grew to loathe human civilization at this age. He hated society's artificial structuring of time, the mindless play of eating, sleeping, working, reproducing, and dying. He didn't want to be part of it, and then he discovered, or maybe more accurately, he became aware of his psychokinetic abilities. He could manipulate the grandfather clock downstairs with the power of his mind alone. That clock, by the way, becomes one of the most iconic symbols of his curse in later seasons. The victims see it before they die. Henry started testing his abilities by mutilating and killing animals: rabbits, chickens, squirrels, dogs. As he went about these killings, he figured out how to reach into and manipulate minds and memories. Now, here's where the two accounts of events diverge significantly. Henry claimed he consciously chose to use his powers to torture his father by making him hallucinate his war experiences from World War II. Victor had ordered the shelling of an innocent household while serving in France and was tortured by visions of a baby burning alive. But the alternative account suggests Henry didn't consciously choose any of this. He was forced to do it by the shadowy influence from the cave incident. The alternative account also tells us something really interesting. During this time, Henry apparently befriended and dated a girl named Patty Newby, despite otherwise struggling to make friends at Hawkins High School. When she learned about his powers, she tried to convince him they could be used for good. Henry even created a vision for her where she could express herself through singing while being supported by everyone around her. But throughout their relationship, Henry was haunted by visions of a humanoid monster and was terrified he would be forced to kill Patty. This is genuinely tragic. There was a version of Henry that wanted connection, that wanted to be good, that had someone who believed in him, but the entity wouldn't let him have that. When Virginia started to suspect her son was responsible for all the strange happenings in their home, she wanted to send him to a psychiatrist, which Henry viewed as ridiculous because in his mind, he wasn't the one who was broken. Virginia got in contact with Dr. Martin Brenner, hoping for him to take Henry away. According to the alternative account, Brenner was actually manipulating Virginia by supplying her with drugs, and under their influence, she told Brenner everything about her son. Brenner took Henry to Hawkins National Laboratory, where he revealed that he tracked Henry down because of the spyglass left in the caves. He explained that Henry gained a unique blood type from the incident, just like Brenner's own father did during the Project Rainbow incident. In a sensory deprivation chamber, Henry showed Brenner the humanoid creature, displaying it on a screen. This is significant because it proves Henry had a connection to the entity even before the official Upside Down was opened. Later, Brenner tried to force Henry to kill a prisoner, but Henry broke down and ended up stabbing 2 guards instead. He insisted on leaving the laboratory, and Brenner let him go. When Henry returned home, he sensed his family was unhappy about his return. Using his powers, he read his mother's thoughts and learned she wanted to send him back to Brenner. What went down next was the major disaster for the Creel: family. Whether Henry consciously chose to attack his family, or whether the entity took control, the result was the same. As the Creels sat around the dinner table, potentially on March 14, 1959, Henry used his powers to turn on the radio. distracting his father. The lights flickered. Virginia was launched into the air and mutilated, the bones in her limbs breaking and her eyes imploding in their sockets before she crashed onto the dining room table. Victor grabbed his children and tried to escape, but Henry jammed the lock with his powers while making his father hallucinate back to the war. While Victor was trapped in his own mind, Henry killed Alice the same way he killed their mother. He intended to kill Victor too, but he ruined his own plan by turning on the radio. The music playing provided Victor with an anchor to reality. He thought he heard the voice of an angel, and it allowed him to break free of his son's control. Victor collapsed. Henry collapsed too, having overexerted his powers and entered a coma. This detail about music as a lifeline becomes especially important in Season 4 when Max uses her favorite song to escape Vecna's curse. Victor woke up as the sole family member left relatively unscathed. He was arrested for the murders and sent to Penhurst Mental Hospital, where his mental health deteriorated so badly that he attempted suicide by gouging out his own eyes. He was stopped before he could actually die, but he would remain there for decades, believing a demon had killed his family. Meanwhile, according to the alternative account, Henry eventually woke up later that night and went to Hawkins High because he learned Brenner was trying to find Patty. A confrontation happened at the school atop the stage of a production of Dark of the Moon. Brenner tried to convince Henry that Patty was his weakness, while Patty desperately told Henry to ignore him. The entity took control again, and Henry threw Patty off the stage. She survived but was hospitalized. Henry fell unconscious, and Brenner finally took him back to Hawkins' lab for good. Victor was told that Henry died a week after Virginia and Alice from shock. This was a lie. Brenner had fabricated Henry's death. Henry woke from his coma to find himself trapped at Hawkins National Laboratory under Brenner's watchful eye. He was designated the first of a new group of test subjects, and at some point, Brenner tattooed 001 on his forearm. That's right, Henry Creel was one, the original. Every numbered child that came after, including 11, was an attempt to recreate what he was. For some length of time, Brenner conducted tests on Henry's abilities, including his ability to imagine and destroy within the void and his remote viewing capabilities. But Brenner didn't trust him. He had a device called Soteria inserted into Henry's neck, a miniature suppressant that blocked his powers. Henry was demoted from test subject to orderly, forced to attend to the lab and assist. Brenner with the new generation of children. Brenner would occasionally order the other orderlies to torture Henry to keep him intimidated. 20 years. Henry spent 20 years as a powerless prisoner in the lab where he had been the first experiment. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. Brenner used Henry's unique blood in transfusions during Project MKUltra. Pregnant test subjects were given experimental drugs in Henry's blood while in sensory deprivation tanks. Their children were then abducted and raised at Hawkins' lab. These children had psychokinetic abilities similar to Henry's. 11's powers, the powers of all the numbered children, they came from Henry. He was literally the source. During his years as an orderly, Henry took a particular interest in one test subject, 11. After witnessing her being bullied by the other children, he believed they were similarly misunderstood. He also recognized that she was the most powerful of all the test subjects. He helped her during times when her peers ridiculed her, offering encouraging words and advice. Was this genuine connection? Manipulation? Probably both. Henry saw in 11 the potential to become like him, and he developed that relationship for years. On September 4th, 1979, the endgame began. Over several days, Henry manipulated 11 through conversations in the Rainbow Room. He told her she reminded him of the mythical test subject 1, insisting that 1 was real despite Brenner telling the children otherwise. He advised her to use negative emotions like anger and sadness to better channel her abilities. He revealed that Brenner had lied about her mother's death. He was radicalizing her, turning her against Brenner while building her trust in him. On September 8th, Henry told 11 that the other children were planning to kill her. He gave her a key card and told her to meet him in the basement, where he showed her an escape route through a drain pipe. But first, he convinced her to first use her powers to remove the Soteria chip from his neck. The moment that chip came out, Henry's abilities came flooding back after 20 years of suppression. Security guards stormed the basement. The two reached a corridor surrounded by guards, and Henry unleashed 2 decades of pent-up rage. He used his restored powers to maim and kill the guards, then told 11 to wait in a storage cupboard while revealing his 001 tattoo. What followed was a massacre. Henry killed every other test subject and various Hawkins lab personnel, knocking Brenner unconscious in the process. When 11 entered the Rainbow Room, she watched in horror as Henry finished killing two. He explained his origins and philosophy to her and asked her to join him in his goal to eradicate humanity. But Eleven refused. She used her powers to fling Henry into the wall. Angered and disappointed, he stood back up and they engaged in a psychokinetic duel. Henry initially overwhelmed her and almost won, but Eleven found strength in a distant memory and ultimately overpowered him, pinning him against the wall. She began disintegrating his body, but in doing so, she accidentally opened an interdimensional gate. Henry was pulled through into another dimension. The gate sealed up. Brenner recovered and entered the Rainbow Room. Though he initially believed Eleven was responsible for the massacre, surveillance footage revealed the truth. Brenner was confused by Henry's disappearance, wondering if he was still out there somewhere, hiding in the darkness. He had no idea how right he was. After Eleven sent him through the gate, Henry fell through a strange interdimensional space between two parallel planes surrounded by mountainous terrain and raging storms. He was constantly electrocuted by lightning. These strikes began his physical transformation from human to something else entirely. When he eventually emerged, he would be unrecognizable as the boy from Indiana. Henry exited this falling space and entered a mysterious alternate dimension. According to one account, he had visited this place once before as a child, but he seemed to have no memory of it. At first, he thought it was a kind of purgatory, but he came to see it as a realm unspoiled by mankind. He explored the alien terrain, encountering many things, including faceless humanoid predators. And then he found what he called the most extraordinary thing of all, a swirling, storm-like mass of shadowy particles, a being through which various life forms could be psychically connected through a shared hive mind. Henry used his powers to reconstitute this mist organism into a form that satisfied him, a giant, spider-like entity with a flame-shaped head, the Mind Flayer. But here's the thing we learn in Season 5. Henry believed he discovered and shaped this entity. In reality, the entity had already infected him decades earlier in that cave. The Mind Flayer allowed Henry to think he was in control. Their relationship was complicated, with Henry repeatedly attempting to seize full control while the entity retaliated by forcing him to relive troubling memories. When Will Byers confronted Vecna in Season 5 and begged him to resist the Mind Flayer's control, Henry declared that he and the Mind Flayer had never controlled each other, but were rather one. He rejected any chance of redemption. The truth is messy. Was Henry a victim who became a villain, or was he always the villain being used as a vessel? The show seems to suggest it's both simultaneously. Now let's connect this to everything that happens in seasons 1 through 3. Henry, now transformed into Vecna, decided to target Will Byers specifically. He chose Will because they shared traits. Both were outcasts, both were misunderstood, but there was also strategic calculation. Will would become a spy, a conduit for future plans. On November 6, 1983, when Brenner ordered Eleven to make psychic contact with a Demogorgon while immersed in an altered state, she accidentally created a gate to the Upside Down. This gate, the Mother Gate, allowed the dimension to begin spreading through the lower levels of the lab. The moment of contact also unleashed the Demogorgon on Hawkins. It attacked Will as he cycled home from Mike's house. But here's a detail most people miss. When Will ran home and tried to escape through the pulled front door, the door mysteriously unlocked itself. That wasn't the Demogorgon. That was Vecna, using the hive mind, manipulating events from the Upside Down. He was orchestrating Will's capture from the very beginning. Will hid and evaded the Demogorgon for days, but was eventually captured and taken to the Upside Down version of Hawkins Public Library. The Demogorgon dropped Will on the floor and then stepped away and bowed as Vecna emerged from the shadows. Vecna affixed Will to the wall using vines and attached a tendril to his mouth as a feeding tube for organic matter. As Will woke up panicking, Vecna ran his hand across the child's forehead and promised they would do such beautiful things together. This single scene recontextualizes the entire first season. Will was specifically chosen by an intelligence that had been planning this for years. In 1984, Vecna and the Mind Flayer made their initial attempt at taking over the world through Will's psychic connection. They sent an army of Demodogs to attack Hawkins' lab while possessing Will. 11 closed the Mother Gate, severing the psychic link and killing the creatures. Will's friends and family forced a piece of the Mind Flayer out of his body, but that piece remained dormant at Brimborn Steelworks until 1985, when Soviet machines opened a new gate and re-established the psychic link. Through this fragment, Vecna began kidnapping and possessing multiple humans and rats known as the Flayed, feeding them chemicals and melting their bodies into biomass. This biomass was combined to create a proxy form through which the Mind Flayer could act directly in the human world. That giant spider monster in Season 3, that was Vecna's design brought to physical reality. The proxy form wounded Eleven, causing her powers to become neutralized. But it was rendered useless when Joyce Byers and Jim Hopper shut down the Soviet Gate. By 1986, Vecna had found a new method. He discovered that powerful psychic connections, like the one between Eleven and the Demogorgon that created the original gate, could open new gates between dimensions. If he could form similar connections with human minds at the moment of their death, he could open gates without needing Eleven at all. He targeted teenagers with trauma or mental health issues, people whose suffering made them vulnerable. He would appear in their minds, making them experience headaches, nosebleeds, and nightmares. Then the hallucinations would escalate. They would see the grandfather clock from his childhood home. Countless Black Widows would appear, and finally, Vecna himself would manifest, overwhelming them with fear before killing them by breaking their limbs and imploding their eyes. Exactly how he killed his mother and sister. The death would open a gate at the location of the killing. Chrissy Cunningham was first. Despite being a popular cheerleader, she was secretly suffering from her mother's verbal abuse about her weight. Vecna exploited that trauma, killing her in Eddie Munson's trailer and opening the first gate. Fred Benson was next, haunted by survivor's guilt after accidentally causing his friend's death in a car crash. Patrick McKinney followed, berated by his father who called him a disgrace. 3 deaths, 3 gates. Vecna needed 4 to achieve his apocalyptic vision. Max Mayfield was his 4th target, chosen because she was struggling with guilt over Billy's death. Despite their difficult relationship, she felt responsible because she had wished for something to happen to him. When Vecna cornered her in his mindscape, he was about to complete his plan. But Max escaped using the same trick that saved Victor Creel decades earlier: music. Her friends played Running Up That Hill through her headphones, giving her an anchor to reality. She pulled at a vine in Vecna's neck, causing him pain, and ran toward a mental window back to the real world. The final confrontation of Season 4 was the group's plan to kill Vecna while he was distracted with a victim. Max would act as bait, letting Vecna into her mind while Nancy, Steve, and Robin attacked his physical body in the Upside Down. Meanwhile, Eleven piggybacked into Max's consciousness from Nevada, hoping to fight Vecna psychically. In the Mindscape, Vecna revealed the truth about the Mind Flayer to Eleven. He had shaped it. He had been controlling everything all along. The Mind Flayer had been his puppet this whole time. Nancy, Steve, and Robin attacked Vecna with Molotov cocktails and a shotgun while Eleven fought him mentally, and Joyce and Hopper killed Demodogs in Russia to weaken the hive mind. The combined assault sent Vecna crashing through a window, but the group was too late to save Max completely. Though they revived her, she fell into a coma, and her momentary death opened the 4th gate. All 4 gates expanded and converged on Hawkins Town Square, creating an earthquake-like catastrophe that killed dozens. Vecna's plan had succeeded despite his apparent defeat. For 19 months after March 1986, Vecna disappeared. His body vanished from where it fell at the Creel house. The group searched the Upside Down repeatedly but found no leads. Meanwhile, Max remained comatose with her consciousness trapped in Vecna's mind. Lost and confused, she traveled through Henry's memories, including the Hawkins Lab massacre and his time at Hawkins High. Eventually, Henry appeared within the memories and chased her until they reached a memory of a cavern. Max climbed into the cave, and Henry suddenly seized up in fear and fled. That cave was where the Mind Flayer first infected him. Even Vecna was afraid of that place. In November 1987, Vecna returned with a new strategy. Instead of targeting traumatized teenagers, he went after elementary school children. These children were deemed weak in body and in mind, perfect to become vessels for an unknown purpose. 12 children would be taken to something called the Pain Tree in the Abyss. But Vecna changed his approach. He appeared to the children as a benevolent imaginary friend, a persona that Holly Wheeler dubbed Mr. Watsit. Through this friendly disguise, he gained their trust, warning them about monsters while secretly sending Demogorgons to capture them. A Demogorgon attacked the Wheeler house to capture Holly, critically injuring Karen and Ted. Holly was taken to the Pain Tree, hooked up to feeding tube vines alongside other children. Her consciousness was sent into Vecna's mind, where Mr. Watsit claimed to have saved her from the monsters and promised that friends would soon join her. The group at WSQK, where the kids had set up their base, began to deduce Vecna's plan through Will's continued connection to the hive mind. They managed to prevent the capture of another child, Derek Turnbow, by setting traps and injuring the Demogorgon sent after him. When the military covered up the gates and established a base in the Upside Down, Vecna launched a full assault on the Mac-Z, the military command center built where the 4 gates converged. Masses of Demogorgons attacked, slaughtering soldiers, and then Vecna himself walked through the gate. He cleared through the military using vines and telekinesis. He summoned Will toward him and revealed his intention to use the children as vessels. He called Will his first vessel before retreating to the Upside Down. But Vecna had underestimated Will, reaching deeper into the hive mind than ever before. Will discovered he had Vecna-like powers. He used them to immobilize and kill 3 Demogorgons instantly, and the connection that Vecna had established years ago to use Will as a spy had evolved into something else entirely. Will could tap into the hive mind and use it against its master. So, in the end, when they had their last big fight in the Abyss, the Mind Flayer showed up to take on the party, looking totally different. 11 jumped into the creature's body and tore Vecna out of the tendrils, getting right into a fight with him. The group realized that harming the Mind Flayer hurt Vecna too, since they were connected through the hive mind. While the party attacked the Mind Flayer from outside, 11 and Vecna fought inside. Weakened by the damage the Mind Flayer was taking, Vecna tried to stop 11 with his ranged attack, but Will telekinetically restrained him, declaring they were no longer afraid of him, and ripped off Vecna's left hand. 11 impaled Vecna on a spike. Once the Mind Flayer was dead, the party freed the children from the cave. They found Vecna mortally wounded, but still alive. And it was Joyce Byers, the mother who had fought to save her son from Vecna's influence for years, who finished it. She decapitated Henry Creel with several blows from an axe, finally ending his reign of terror. The Duffer Brothers did something remarkable with this character. They took the big bad of their final seasons and traced him all the way back to the beginning. Every supernatural event in Stranger Things connects to Henry Creel. The Demogorgon attacks, the Mind Flayer's possessions, the gates between worlds, Will's suffering, 11's trauma, all of it flows from one broken child who stumbled into a cave in 1950, and in the end, that little boy became Vecna. And Vecna had to die for anyone else to live. Vecna is the king of the Upside Down, but back in the real world, a new human villain has taken over. With Dr. Brenner gone, the military has a new leader. She is colder, meaner, and she doesn't care about the kids at all. She just wants to win the war. This is the entire story of Dr. K. The first time we really see Dr. K, she is in her element inside this military compound that the government has built literally inside the Upside Down, which they access through this massive secure zone called the Mac-Z. She dissects a monster, which is just the most hardcore way to introduce a character. She is cutting into this giant, bulbous, pulsating spleen-like organ that came from the flesh wall of the Upside Down, and she looks completely unbothered by it. It immediately establishes that this is a woman who has seen some things and isn't scared of the biological horrors of this dimension. She is a scientist first and foremost, but she commands the room like a general. Her main goal right off the bat is established very clearly. She wants to save people. She wants to stop the Upside Down from consuming the world, but the way she goes about it is what makes her so fascinatingly gray. She is Machiavellian in the truest sense of the word because she believes the ends justify the means. She isn't necessarily evil in the way Vecna is evil, where he wants to cause suffering, but she is cold and calculating, and she views people, even children, as variables in an equation that needs to be solved. Her primary obsession in the first volume is 11. She believes that she needs 11, and she tells her subordinates that innocent people are dying. So finding the girl, as she calls her, is the only thing that matters. But here's the thing, she doesn't actually know if 11 is good or bad. In the first episode of Season 5, we see Dr. K operating under the assumption that 11 might be responsible for the disappearances of the children in Hawkins. She thinks 11 took the 4 missing kids when in reality we know it was Vecna. This misunderstanding drives a huge wedge between her and our main heroes because she is hunting 11 down with military precision using resources that should be used to fight Vecna. She has even developed specific technology to counter 11's powers, which is just terrifying when you think about it. Speaking of technology and how Dr. K operates, let's talk about the Burn. This is a military operation where they use flamethrowers to clear the vines and the biological growth around the gate so they can move convoys of supplies and troops into the Upside Down base. It shows the sheer scale of Dr. K's operation. She isn't just sending a few guys in hazmat suits. She has a fully functional base with electricity and labs and containment units right in the middle of hell. She is studying the monsters, keeping them in cages, trying to understand their biology, presumably to find a way to kill them more efficiently, or maybe to use them. Is a scene where she is looking at a tentacled creature in a glass cage, and she notes that it gets stronger in the cold and weaker in the heat, which becomes a very important plot point later on. It shows that she is observant and she learns from her environment, but she lacks that empathy that the heroes have. Now, before we get too deep into the nitty-gritty, I have to stop for a second and ask you to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. If you don't subscribe, Dr. K might send a convoy to your house to study your lack of engagement, and trust me, you do not want to end up in one of her containment cells. Okay, so back to Dr. K. The conflict really ramps up when our heroes, specifically Hopper and Eleven, start interfering with her operations. Hopper has been doing these crawls into the Upside Down trying to do recon, and he knows that the military is swarming the place. Dr. K is smart, though she knows someone is poking around. She eventually captures Hopper after a massive confrontation. This leads to one of the most intense scenes in the volume, where Hopper is being held in Dr. K's lab. She has him in a room with one of those tentacled creatures she has been studying. This is where we see her true colors. She isn't shouting or losing her temper. She is calm and icy. She stands behind the safety glass and watches Hopper struggle as the creature wraps around his throat. She explains to him almost like a teacher lecturing a student about the biology of the creature. She tells him that she knows heat weakens it, but the cold makes it thrive. And then in a moment that is just Linda Hamilton badassery and villainy, she reaches over to the temperature dial on the wall and she turns the heat down. She literally makes the room colder to make the monster stronger just to torture Hopper into talking. She wants to know what he knows about Eleven and why he brought her to the base. It is brutal. It shows that she is willing to torture a man to death if it means getting the information she needs to save the world. She sees Hopper as an obstacle, a thorn in her side, as she calls him. But Hopper, being Hopper, is stubborn as a mule and he refuses to crack easily. This interrogation scene is pivotal because it reveals that Dr. K is desperate. She is under pressure from her superiors, she has a timeline, and she is failing to stop the killings. She needs a win, and she thinks Hopper and Eleven are the key. But the biggest mystery surrounding Dr. K isn't just her interrogation techniques, it is what she is hiding in her vault. Throughout the first volume, there are whispers and clues about a secure area in her lab, a vault door that is heavily guarded. Even her own men, like Sergeant Akers, don't know exactly what is in there. They just know it is secret shit that no one is supposed to see. Eleven manages to infiltrate Akers' mind and sees memories of Dr. K entering this vault. Eleven becomes convinced that Dr. K has captured Vecna. It makes sense in a way, right? If she is the head of the military operation and she is studying the monsters, maybe she managed to trap the big bad himself. Eleven tells Hopper that Dr. K is keeping someone powerful like her behind that door, and she assumes it is one. This drives a lot of the plot as Hopper and Eleven try to break into the vault thinking they can kill Vecna while he is trapped. However, when they finally do break in, it is a massive twist. Hopper gets past the security. He opens the door expecting to find a monster or Vecna rotting away, but instead he finds 8, Kaylee, Eleven's sister from Season 2. This changes everything about how we view Dr. K. It means she has been collecting the test subjects, or at least trying to use people with powers to fight her war. It raises so many questions about how she found Callie and what she has been doing to her. It also recontextualizes her hunt for Eleven. She doesn't just want Eleven for information, she wants to add her to the collection. She wants to weaponize her just like she is presumably trying to weaponize Kaylee. We also have to talk about the weapon Dr. K developed to stop Eleven. Hopper calls it Kryptonite. It is this sonic blast speaker system that emits a frequency that completely neutralizes Eleven. It paralyzes her and causes her immense pain, preventing her from using her powers. This shows that Dr. K has done her homework. She knows that brute force isn't enough to stop a telekinetic superhero, so she used science to find a weakness. When the military convoy hits Hopper and Eleven in the Upside Down, they use this weapon, and it almost ends their journey right there. It is terrifying to see Eleven, who we are used to seeing flip vans and bring down helicopters, be rendered completely helpless by a sound. It makes Dr. K a formidable opponent because she fights with her brain. The dynamic between Dr. K and Colonel Sullivan is also really interesting. Sullivan is the brute force guy, the military grunt who just wants to shoot things and blow stuff up. He hates Eleven and blames her for everything. Dr. K is clearly in charge though. There is a scene where Sullivan is ranting about 11, and Dr. K shuts him down with cold, hard data. She brings up the demographics of the missing children, pointing out that there are 73 children in Hawkins between the ages of 9 and 10 and predicting where the next target will be. She treats the situation like a statistical model, while Sullivan treats it like a war zone. She even orders him around, telling him to report to the MAC-Z and warning him that if he goes looking for Akers, he will find a dead man. She is commanding, and she doesn't suffer fools. But ultimately, Dr. K's arrogance is her downfall in Volume 1. She underestimates the connection between Hopper and 11, and she underestimates the resourcefulness of our heroes. In that final confrontation in the lab, while she is torturing Hopper, she doesn't account for 11's sheer will. 11 is hiding under a desk watching her father figure get strangled, and she tries to use her powers, but the kryptonite dampeners are too strong. So she does something Dr. K probably didn't put in her statistical model. She attacks physically. She creates a distraction that allows Hopper to break free. Hopper turns the tables. He knocks out Dr. K, but he doesn't kill her. This is important. He leaves her unconscious on the floor. This means Dr. K is still alive at the end of Volume 1. So, what does this mean for the future? Well, we know Linda Hamilton is a legend, and you don't bring in someone like that just to have her get knocked out halfway through the season and disappear. She is definitely coming back for Volume 2. The question is, how will she react? She has been humiliated. Her base has been breached. Her prisoner has been discovered. And her top target has escaped. She is going to be furious, but she is also a pragmatist. If things go south with Vecna and the Upside Down starts bleeding into the real world even more aggressively, she might be forced to align with the heroes. Imagine a team-up between Sarah Connor and Hopper. It would be insane. But for now, she remains this fascinating antagonist who believes she is the hero of her own story. She is doing terrible things for what she thinks are the right reasons, and those are always the most dangerous kinds of villains. She is the embodiment of the government's cold, unfeeling response to a supernatural tragedy, and Linda Hamilton plays it with such steely perfection that you almost respect her even while you hate her. It's actually kind of wild when you step back and look at the history of the show, because from the very beginning they have had this knack for casting actors who aren't just good. They are literally part of the DNA of the genre that Stranger Things is paying homage to. You start with Winona Ryder in Season 1, and she is obviously a generational icon, but then you look at Matthew Modine as Dr. Brenner, and he was huge in the 80s with Full Metal Jacket, and then you keep going down the list, and it is just hit after hit. You had Sean Astin in Season 2, who is obviously a Goonies legend, and he came in as Bob Newby, the superhero we didn't deserve, and then Paul Reiser from Aliens played Dr. Owens, who everyone thought was going to be a bad guy because of his role in Aliens, but turned out to be a solid dude. Then you get Carrie Elwes from The Princess Bride playing the sleazy mayor in Season 3, and Robert Englund, literally Freddy Krueger himself, showing up in Season 4. So the bar was set incredibly high for the final season, and they needed someone who could stand toe-to-toe with the intensity of the apocalypse, and maybe even scare us a little bit more than the monsters do. As we look toward the second volume, the fate of Dr. K is hanging in the balance. Will she double? Down on her ruthless methods and try to kill 11 and the others to maintain control? Or will she realize that her methods aren't working, and that she needs to listen to the people who have actually fought Vecna and won? And what about Callie? Now that we know she's been holding 8 prisoner, that is going to be a massive plot point. Did Kaylee agree to help her? Was she tortured? Dr. K has a lot to answer for. But one thing is for sure, Linda Hamilton has etched her name into the Stranger Things Hall of Fame with this performance. She brings a gravitas and a legitimacy to the military storyline that elevates the whole season. She is scary, she is smart, and she is absolutely relentless. Dr. K might be the head honcho of the MAC-Z, but she is about to find out that in Hawkins you don't mess with the party, especially when they are fighting for their lives. It is going to be an epic showdown, and I, for one, cannot wait to see what Dr. K does next. And Dr. K didn't come empty-handed. To restart the psychic program, she hunted down the one subject who thought she was safe. 11's sister is no longer running the streets. She's back in the lab as K's prisoner. This is the entire story of Number 8, aka Kali. To really understand Kali, you have to go back way before the Demogorgons and the Mind Flayer were terrorizing Indiana. We have to go back to the mid-60s. Kali was born in 1964 and she wasn't born in a lab. She started her life in London, England, just a little girl of Indian heritage living a relatively normal life in London during the swinging 60s. In 1969, when she was just 5 years old, her life was effectively stolen. This is where the infamous Dr. Martin Brenner and his associates tracked her down and abducted her, just snatched her up. The records are a bit fuzzy on the exact date. She was last seen in London on either April 12th or July 12th of 1969, but the result was the same. The local police in London tried to find her. They looked everywhere, but efforts to track her down were completely unsuccessful. It was like she just vanished off the face of the earth. And in a way she did, because she was transported across the Atlantic to Hawkins' lab in Indiana. Now, you have to ask yourself, why her? Why grab a 5-year-old girl from London? The theory is that it ties back to MK Ultra. It's entirely possible and honestly likely that Kali's mother was a test subject in the MK Ultra program, maybe without even fully realizing the implications. Brenner, being the cold, calculating scientist he is, was likely seeking to study the effects of those experiments on the next generation. So, Kali was a legacy subject. Once she was in the lab, the name Kali Prasad was stripped away. She was given a new title, a number, 8. This is where things get interesting regarding her abilities. We know the kids in the lab developed psychic powers, but the how is always a bit murky. There's a strong implication that she might have received a transfusion of Henry Creel's blood. Henry Creel, or 1, is basically the source code for all these special abilities. But genetics and biology are funny things because Kali didn't turn out like the others. Most of the kids, like 11, developed telekinesis, the ability to move stuff with their minds. Kali? She failed to develop that. She couldn't crush a Coke can or flip a van with her mind. But she developed something else, something arguably just as dangerous and maybe even more psychologically terrifying. She developed the ability to warp perceptions. She could make you see things that weren't there or hide things that were. It's like she displayed a completely separate aspect of Henry Creel's power set. While 1 had the telekinesis and the mental intrusion, Kali got the illusions. She became a master of the mind's eye. Life in the lab was, predictably, a nightmare. But she wasn't entirely alone. She had a sister. Kali and 11, who was much younger at the time, used to play together. They had this room called the Rainbow Room, which sounds cheerful, but was really just a sterile playroom in a house of horrors. They had these moments of connection. There's actually a specific event in 1904 where Kali and 11 were playing in the Rainbow Room when Terry Ives, 11's birth mother, arrived. Terry had stormed the lab with a gun, desperate to rescue her daughter. Kali was there. She saw it happen. She saw Terry get apprehended. As time went on, Kali got older, and unlike 11, who was kept somewhat naive for a long time, Kali became aware of her situation. By the time the mid to late 70s rolled around, specifically prior to 1979, she was done. She had grown tired of the abuse, the tests, the constant pressure. She wanted out. And this is where Kali proves she's incredibly formidable. She used her abilities, those illusion powers, to escape the lab. She actually did it. She broke out. This timing is super important because it means she missed the massacre. In 1909, when Henry Creel, 1, went on his rampage and killed almost all the other children, Kali was already gone. 11 had faint memories of Kali, but those memories got buried after Elle overexerted herself, banishing 1 to the Upside Down. So, for a long time, Kali was just a ghost in 11's mind. After escaping, Cal was a kid alone with superpowers she barely understood, on the run from a shadowy government agency. She managed to find a new family, a place to call home, which sounds great, but it ended tragically. She eventually lost that family too. The sad truth was that they couldn't help her with her abilities. They weren't equipped to deal with a psychic child who was being hunted. Losing that second chance at a normal life seemed to be the breaking point for her. Kali stopped running and started fighting. But she didn't fight for justice in the superhero sense, she fought for revenge. She decided to use her powers to hunt down the people from the lab, the people who had hurt her and ruined her life. She became a vigilante, but a dark one. She wasn't alone in this though. She found other outcasts, people who had been chewed up and spit out by society. She met Axel, Mick, Funshine, and later Dottie. They formed a gang, a motley crew of punks and runaways living on the fringe. They lived in an abandoned warehouse in Chicago, surviving by stealing and committed to a mission of vengeance. They would track down the people from their past who had wronged them and kill them. It was brutal, it was violent, but to Kaylee, it felt like justice. Fast forward to 1984. This is where our main story really picks up. In October of 1984, the gang was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They had a target, Dr. John Pericles. They killed him, but the police were on them fast. This is the first time we really see Kali's powers in action in the wild. The gang was speeding away in a van, entering a tunnel, with the cops right on their tail. It looked like they were trapped. But Kali, sitting in the passenger seat, focused her mind. She clenched her fist. Blood started dripping from her nose, just like Elle, and she cast a massive illusion. She made the police officer pursuing them believe that the tunnel entrance was blocked by a massive pile of falling rubble. The cop slammed on the brakes, causing a massive car crash behind him, and the gang slipped away into the shadows. They fled back to Chicago to lay low in their warehouse hideout. But while they were cooling their heels, something was happening miles away in Indiana. 11 had found out about her. Through her own psychic void walking, Elle found files, saw a picture, and realized she wasn't the first. She used her remote viewing to track Kaylee down. When 11 arrived at the warehouse, it wasn't exactly a warm welcome at first. She walked into this gritty punk hideout and was immediately threatened by Axel, who pulled a knife. He wasn't messing around, but Kaylee stepped in. She recognized something in 11, or maybe she just sensed the power. To stop Axel, she used her powers to make him think he was covered in spiders. It was terrifying. He was freaking out, brushing off invisible bugs. It showed how ruthless Kaylee could be, even to her own friends, to maintain control. 11 explained that she had seen Kaylee in a vision from her mother, Terry. She demonstrated her own powers by moving some stuff around, proving she was gifted too. Then, the big reveal, they showed each other their wrist tattoos. 008 and 011. Sisters. It was this huge emotional moment. Kaylee took 11 up to the roof of the warehouse to talk. 11 explained her situation, that she had a policeman, Hopper, who was trying to cut a deal with the lab to let her have a normal life. Kaylee shut that down immediately. She told Elle that the lab people saw them as monsters. She didn't believe for a second that a deal was possible, but she also told Elle something important. She said their gifts weren't bad. They shouldn't be hidden. To demonstrate, she conjured a beautiful illusion of a butterfly in her hand. Kaylee made Elle a bed for the night, and she told Elle that she felt whole now. She believed that Terry Ives had sent 11 to her for a reason, that they belonged together. It was the first time in a long time Kali probably felt a real connection that wasn't based on survival or revenge. But Kali is a complicated mentor. Once 11 fell asleep, Kali started plotting. She wanted to use 11's tracking abilities to find another target. Mick, one of the gang members, wasn't happy about it. He thought it was too risky to hunt another man so soon after Pittsburgh. But Kaylee insisted. She justified it by saying 11 was in pain and needed this. She declared they were moving out the next day. The next morning, Kaylee officially introduced Elle to the gang. She explained that while the others weren't lab experiments, they were outcasts just like them. She showed Elle her kill list, photos of people responsible for their pain. She framed it as justice. These men were criminals, they hurt people, and they deserved to die. It was a very binary way of looking at the world. Us versus them. When 11 admitted she had killed before the Demogorgon, the agents at the school, Kaylee seized on that. She explained that the difference was that those people were actively attacking Elle at the moment. Kali's philosophy was about preemptive strikes. The people they hunted wanted to hurt them, so the gang was just making the first move. Then came the training. She took 11 to a train yard. It was this industrial wasteland, perfect for a lesson in power. Kaylee explained she used to keep her pain inside, but she healed by confronting it. She asked Elle to move a massive railroad car. 11 tried, using her usual method of just straining and screaming, but it didn't work. Kaylee coached her. She told her to stop just pushing and to find the anger, to focus on the pain, focus on the lab, on Papa, on the bad men. She told her to channel that rage, and it worked. 11 screamed, channeling all that trauma, and the train car skidded across the tracks. Back at the warehouse, 11 looked at the photos and recognized a face. It was Ray Carroll. He was an orderly at the lab. Kaylee remembered him too. She remembered he had once shocked her with a cattle prod. He was a bad guy. 11 used her powers to find him, and the gang geared up. But before they left, they gave Elle a makeover. Slicked back hair, dark makeup, oversized blazer. She looked like a mini Kali. On the way to Ray's place, they stopped at a convenience store. While Kali distracted the clerk with an illusion, the gang started stealing supplies. The clerk caught on and pulled a gun. Kaylee tried to talk him down, but it went south. 11 stepped in and slammed the guy against the wall with her mind, knocking him out. They grabbed the stuff and ran. To Kaylee, this was just survival. Collateral damage. They got to Ray Carroll's apartment and broke in. They wore masks. Kaylee's gang had these creepy masks, and they cornered him. Kaylee and 11 unmasked, revealing themselves as the little girls he used to torment. Ray was terrified. He tried to bargain, saying he was just following orders, but Kaylee told him he had a choice, and he chose to hurt them. Then Ray claimed Brenner was still alive. Kaylee didn't believe him. She thought he was lying to save his skin. 11 began to choke him with her mind, ready to kill him. But then she saw a picture on the wall, a photo of Ray with his 2 little daughters. 11 hesitated. She saw that he was a father. Kaylee didn't care. She was screaming at Elle to do it, to finish it. When Elle wouldn't, Kaylee grabbed a gun. She was going to shoot him herself. She was so consumed by vengeance that she couldn't see the humanity in front of her. But 11 stopped her. Elle used her telekinesis to whip the gun out of Kaylee's hand and out the window. The police sirens were getting closer, so they had to run. Kaylee was furious. She felt betrayed. She warned Elle never to take her choice away again. Back at the hideout, Kaylee tried to explain herself. She told Elle that she was hard on her because she saw her own mistakes in her. She recounted her story, escaping, finding trust, losing it, and deciding to stop hiding. She gave Elle a choice: go back to being a victim and hiding, or stay and fight. She also conjured an illusion of Dr. Brenner in the room. A terrified 11 saw her papa standing there, berating her. It reduced Elle to tears. Kaylee told her she could leave if she wanted, but if she stayed, they could heal together. It was twisted love. She wanted to save Elle, but she was breaking her to do it. Then the reality of their lifestyle caught up with them. The police had tracked them to the warehouse. They were swarming the building. Kaylee gathered the gang. She told them to stay close. She used her power to wrap them all in a cloak of invisibility. It's important to note she's not bending light. She's bending the minds of the cops. To the police, the hallway was empty. The gang snuck past the SWAT team, invisible, right out the back door. They got to the van, but there were cops outside too. They were pinned down. Kaylee pulled one last massive trick. She focused, nose bleeding, and created an illusion of a massive high wall springing up between the van and the police. It bought them time. The cops were confused, seeing a barricade that wasn't there. The gang started to scramble into the van. Kaylee yelled for 11 to get in, but 11 stopped. She had been having visions of her friends in Hawkins. She knew they were in trouble. She looked at Kaylee and told her she had to go help her friends. Kaylee begged her to stay. She said, "They can't save you." She truly believed that only she and Elle could save each other. But 11 looked back and said, "No, but I can save them." As they drove away, Kaylee stared out the back window, watching her sister disappear. She looked devastated. She had finally found someone who understood her, and she lost her again. That's where the show leaves her, mostly. But the story doesn't actually end there. If you dig into the wider lore, things get even crazier. We know that later, 11 used Kaylee's advice, channeling anger, to close the massive gate in Hawkins. So Kaylee's teaching saved the world in a way. But what happened to Kaylee? Well, there is this whole chapter involving the Into the Fire comic series, and some details from the first Shadow stage play lore that provides an overview of the years between 1984 and 1987. In the spring of 1985, a few months after Elle left, Kaylee was still on the run. 2 other former test subjects, Ricky, number 3, and Marcy, number 9.5, managed to track Kaylee and her gang to a barn. When they showed up, Kaylee's PTSD kicked in. She instinctively created an illusion of a forest all around them to hide. She actually mistook Marcy for her sister Jamie. Number 9. She told them that she had seen Jamie recently, alive, which was a shock to Ricky and Marcy, who thought Jamie was dead. But then sometime between late 1984 and 1907, Kaylee's luck ran out. She was captured, not by Brenner, but by the US military and a woman named Dr. K. They transported her to a laboratory that was actually located inside the Upside Down. They shaved her head again, giving her that buzz-cut look she had as a child. And to keep her under control, they used sonic weapons. It turns out, just like 11, Loud sonic frequencies are Kali's kryptonite. They disrupt her focus, making it impossible for her to maintain her illusions. She was restrained in a padded chair, hooked up to electrodes, basically being used as a battery or a test subject all over again. 1986, while Eleven was doing the Nina project to get her powers back, she relived memories where Henry Creel mentioned Kali. He reminded Elle of the time Terry came to the lab. It confirmed that Kali was always a part of that narrative. Then comes the year 1907, which is season 5. On November 4th, 1987, Kali was still in that chair, trapped by the sonic devices. Eleven, who was on a mission to find Vecna, Henry Creel, actually entered that room in the Upside Down base. She saw Kaylee. It had been years since Chicago. Elle was older now. She walked up to Kaylee, who was barely conscious, and held her hand. The touch woke Kaylee up. She looked at Eleven and smiled. It confirmed that Kaylee was still alive and that the bond was still there. So that is the story of number 8. From a little girl in London to a prisoner in Indiana to a punk vigilante in Chicago and finally a captive in the Upside Down. And honestly, we probably haven't seen the last of her. We eventually learned the horrific details of how this went down. Dr. K's agents found her entire gang in Chicago and they showed absolutely no mercy. Axel, Dottie, Funshine, and Mick, the found family Kali had built over years of surviving on the streets, were all killed. Every single one of them. The only people who had ever accepted Kaylee for who she was, gone in an instant. But it gets so much worse than that. Kay was draining Kaylee's blood daily for a very specific and disturbing purpose. When Kaylee eventually managed to escape her cell, faking her death by fainting, and then taking out doctors with surgical tools before using a stolen keycard to get out, she stumbled into another room in the base. What she found there was a line of dying, impregnated women being infused with Kaylee's blood. Dr. K was literally restarting what Brenner had done to Eleven's mother, Terry Ives. She was trying to create a new generation of superpowered children by infusing pregnant women with the blood of the experiments, Kali's blood. This revealed a horrifying truth. Elle wasn't just special because of her powers. She was special because her mother was infused with Henry's blood during pregnancy, making Elle the closest genetic match to restart the entire program. Kay wanted Eleven specifically because she was the perfect template. But you know what happens next is where things really get interesting. When the military, specifically the Wolfpack, comes to retrieve Kali from her cell, they find her sitting there unmoved. But Dr. K realizes something is wrong. Kaylee's presence is an illusion. The girl had been faking it the entire time she was being rescued, using her powers to project an image of herself still sitting in that chair while the real Kali had already escaped with Eleven and Hopper in a stolen military car. Even after years of captivity, her abilities were still sharp enough to fool everyone. That's how good she is. And here's where she makes it very clear to Eleven that she doesn't believe killing Henry, killing Vecna, will actually solve anything. She's not being pessimistic for no reason. She's being realistic based on everything she's experienced. She tells Elle that no matter how far she runs, no matter who she kills, the cycle will continue. The government will always hunt her. Dr. K will always want to restart the program. There will always be another Brenner. This causes serious tension between Kaylee and Hopper, who still doesn't trust her after everything. At the cabin, Hopper calls Kaylee out for telling Elle that killing Vecna won't fix their problems. Kaylee fires back by bringing up the suicide mission Hopper had been planning, the explosives he had strapped to himself as a fail-safe to take out Vecna even if it meant dying. Both of them are guilty of keeping secrets from Elle, and both of them have their own ideas about sacrifice. Kaylee remains absolutely adamant that Vecna's death will be pointless in stopping Elle from being hunted by the government. She's not wrong, honestly. The problem isn't one monster, the problem is the system. But then Kali takes her philosophy to its logical, devastating conclusion. She suggests to Eleven that during the final battle against Vecna, the two of them should stay behind as the bridge collapses. They should let themselves die in the Upside Down. To Kali, this is freedom. If they're dead, they can't be hunted anymore. They can't be used as templates for more experiments. They can't be captured and drained for blood. Elle and Kali actually meet spiritually in the Void to discuss this plan. Despite all of this darkness, Kali still joins the final mission. She suggests that she accompany Elle into the Void to help fight Vecna in his mindscape, alongside Max, who knows her way around. When the party loads up Murray's Bradley's big buy truck with weapons and goes into the Upside Down for the final battle, Kaylee is right there with them. Once inside the Upside Down, the group splits up. Murray parks the truck outside Hawkins' lab, and Eleven shares an emotional goodbye with Mike before she, Hopper, Murray, and Kaylee head into the lab so Elle can use the sensory deprivation tank to attack Vecna psychically. This is where Callie blindfolds herself to join Eleven in her mind, entering the void alongside her sister to explore Vecna's mindscape. In Eleven's mindscape, Kaylee helps guide the mission. Elle reveals she's already found Vecna but can't reach into his mind yet because he's still in the Abyss. But when Elle touches his hand, they're drawn into his memories, because the Abyss has gotten close enough to the Upside Down. They land in Hawkins High School on the day of a play, November 6, 1959. When they finally confront Vecna in his Mr. Watsit mindscape, Kaylee proves exactly why her powers are so valuable. Henry walks straight into a trap, and Kaylee hides the kidnapped children with an illusion, so they can watch and understand that Mr. Watsit is the real monster. But Vecna manages to pierce Eleven's mental defenses and discovers the kids have run. Callie and Elle try to take him down together, and in one heart-stopping moment, Kaylee drives a knife down toward Henry's heart. But right before it connects, he vanishes. He's left his mindscape entirely to hunt Eleven in the physical world. Things go from bad to worse when Vecna pulls one of the cruelest tricks of the entire series. Back in Hawkins' lab, Hopper is waiting for Eleven to come out of the tank when gas falls from the ceiling. He starts having visions, first of his daughter Sarah dying, and then of Kaylee trying to convince Eleven to stay and die in the Upside Down. Vecna appears before him, taunting him. When Hopper shoots, Vecna disappears, and Hopper that he's accidentally shot the tank with Eleven inside. He smashes the glass to pull her out, but when he picks her up, her wounds are gone. It was all an illusion from Vecna, tricking Hopper into pulling Eleven out of the tank and ruining their plan. With Elle forcibly removed, Kaylee and Max are yanked out of Henry's mind with her. Now Eleven hatches a new, more desperate plan. She's going to go into the Abyss in the flesh and kill Vecna directly since she no longer has a tank to reach his mind. But Hopper forces her to confess the truth. She was planning to stay behind in the Upside Down and die. And here's where Kaylee proves just how committed she is to that suicidal pact. She pulls a gun on Hopper. She's determined to keep their plan on course. She genuinely believes this is the only way to end the cycle. But the military isn't done making things worse. Lieutenant Akers' forces roll up to Hawkins' lab, and they deploy a helicopter with the sonic weapon, Callie's kryptonite, to immobilize both her and Eleven. In a genuinely shocking moment, Hopper takes Eleven to safety and leaves Kaylee behind as the military combs the building. It's brutal, but then again, she did just pull a gun on him. Eleven appeals to Hopper back in the lab, begging him to go back for Callie. He does. He saves her. But in the process, he gets captured by Akers. Akers threatens to kill Callie unless Hopper tells him where Eleven is. But Kaylee signals to Hopper not to tell. Both of them are willing to die to protect Elle. Neither one will break. Just before Akers can pull the trigger, Murray pops a grenade and throws it off the roof of the building into the rotors of the helicopter. The chopper explodes, throwing the guards down. Akers fires a single shot as a fireball engulfs the outside of Hawkins' lab. And then Eleven arrives and absolutely annihilates the entire group of soldiers. The moment where she forces Akers to shoot himself in the head is one of the most brutal things she's ever done. But we find out where that lone shot Akers fired actually went. It went into Callie's stomach. Eleven pleads with her sister to pull through. But Callie is at peace with this. After all, she never wanted to make it out of this alive. This was her plan from the beginning. Not exactly like this, but close enough. She wanted to die in the Upside Down, free from the cycle of hunting and experimentation. And now she's getting her wish. Murray's celebration at destroying the chopper is cut short as he realizes Kaylee is dead. Just like that, number 8 is gone. But here's the thing about Kaylee's death. It might not be the end of her story. In the final episode's epilogue, 18 months after the Upside Down collapsed, Mike shares a theory with his friends about the night Eleven died. He remembers that when the Upside Down was exploding, the military had been using 3 of those massive sonic machines that usually rendered Eleven completely useless. So if those machines were on, how could Eleven have been standing so upright at the threshold when everything collapsed? Mike's theory is that before Kaylee died, she was able to conjure one last illusion. She projected the image of Eleven standing at that threshold to the Upside Down while the real Eleven escaped somewhere else entirely. We actually see a shot of Eleven hiking somewhere in the present day, reaching a clearing to face 3 beautiful waterfalls she'd once dreamed about. When Max and the others ask Mike how he knows if this is real, he admits he doesn't. He just chooses to believe it, and the others tearfully agree to believe it too. If this theory is true, then Callie's final act wasn't dying. Her final act was saving her sister, using the very last of her strength, her dying breath, to cast one more illusion. The biggest, most important illusion of her entire life. Letting Eleven escape to finally find that happy ending, Callie never believed was possible for either of them. So, that is the story of number 8. From a little girl in London to a woman who took a bullet meant for someone else and who may have used her dying moments to give her sister the one thing she never thought possible: a way out. It's dark, it's complicated, and it's exactly why Kaylee remains one of the most fascinating characters in Stranger Things lore. After this line, not by Brenner, but by the US military and a woman named Dr. K. But after this line, she was restrained in a padded chair, hooked up to electrodes, basically being used as a battery or a test subject all over again. Everything below after this line. It confirmed that Kaylee was still alive and that the bond was still there.